Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement in order to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make their operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten Patton. I'm a business performance consultant over at Dale Carnegie in Tampa Bay, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and ATARC is a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. ATARC provides ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees here joining us today, and a special thanks to Rohit Donda, Mary Beth Simmons, and the entire H2O AI team. This afternoon, we are going to hear from our panelists where we will have a Q&A session. We're also going to pop up a few polls throughout the discussion and answer any audience questions that you may have. Before we begin, I just want to remind you to submit those questions in the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen. And also, if you'd like to receive your CPE credit, make sure that you answer those polls. Now, with that all said, I would love to invite our panelists to please come on camera and come off mute, and we will begin with a round of introductions. So please share with us, hey guys, who you are, your name, your agency, what you do there, and anything else you'd like our audience to know about you. Let's start with Shakib first, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, ATARC, for this opportunity. My name is Shakib Shraibi. I'm Chief Data Scientist at the NTIS, the National Technical Information Service, which is a bureau within the US Department of Commerce. We are known as the best kept secret in government, and that's why I'm here to let everyone know about what we do. We have a very unique mission, which is to assist federal agency leverage data science, data innovation, artificial intelligence to a very proven framework that we've been using for several years now that allows us to partner with the industry, academia, nonprofit organization in order to provide the skilled expertise and help federal agency achieve mission outcome and deliver on their objective. So we know what the situation here in AI, and then that's something that I would like to discuss during this talk. It's we know what we want. We want to deliver on mission effectively and efficiently. But what we have is a large numbers of federal agencies that are still struggling with the antiquated data architectures and the lack of skills and talent. So that's what I would like to discuss today is to talk about NTIS as a potential vehicle to enable data science and artificial intelligence for federal agencies. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Excited to jump in on that. And it's so great to connect with you. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. So good to see you again, Shakib. All right, let's jump over to Dr. Riddick. Please introduce yourself. Can you hear me, Jarrett?
Okay, yeah, the signal's choppy on my end. I apologize. I hope you can hear me. Yep. So good afternoon. My name is Jarrett Riddick. I am the Director of Autonomy in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. In this role, so I serve as the Senior DoD official for strategy and implementation of autonomy across the DoD for all the services at the DoD level. And my main focus in my portfolio is an area that I refer to as trusted autonomy. When the Undersecretary came in, she made it clear that trusted AI and autonomy will be the focus among the critical technology areas that focus in the AI and autonomy area. And so I have stood up an initiative around trusted autonomy. I call that initiative the Optima Initiative, or Operational Trust and Mission Autonomy. And it's all about delivering trusted autonomy in complex contested missions on the multi-domain battlefield in the future, where we're able to enhance human-machine teams based on trust. And here I'm talking about trust not as an emotion or sort of a subjective, but a real quantifiable asset that we can treat as a product. That'll be a quantifiable asset on the battlefield for warfighters in the future. And it's great to me that we're having this discussion today around implementation, because in my initiative, I'm really focusing on developing guidance as to how we deliver trusted autonomy through the traditional acquisition lifecycle. So in the questions today, I have plenty of time to talk about that, but it's really about focusing on transition that accelerates delivery. And prior to being here at USD-R&E, I was in the Army Research Laboratory, leading the directorate where we had the physical autonomy, basic and applied early research for the Army. So pleased to be here. Thanks to ATARC for the invitation, and looking forward to hearing the discussion and learning from the other guests as well. Over.
Yeah, thanks so much. Happy to have you here. All right, let's jump to Jock next.
Hey, well, thanks everybody for having me here. My name is Jock Pageant. I'm the Chief Data Officer for the 18th Airborne Corps. I was previously the Chief Technology Officer for the 82nd. Our experiences with AI in general over the past year or so, with a lot of world events going on, has been pretty dynamic. Previous to those two positions, I have a lot of experience in defense, both as a service member and as a DoD civilian. Really, before I did a short time in healthcare, I spent a lot of time with Joint Special Operations Command, working some of their data and AI initiatives over there. So thanks for the invite. Glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you. And of course, our industry subject matter expert, Jeff, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Kirsten. Thanks. It's really a privilege to be able to participate with today's panelists, and I'm really interested in the conversation. My name is Jeff Phelan. I'm the Chief Growth Officer over at H2O.ai, and really, I've spent my career working hand in glove with the federal government on a lot of really early adoption of technologies. I was privileged to be part of the team that stood up US CERT way back when with DHS, and figuring out what that looked like in Title 10 and Title 50 authorities, and how do you help protect enterprises, and from there moving into building collection platforms and analytic systems for various elements of the government. And then I was able to work with DISA standing up the MilCloud 2 program. So working through, I tend to be on the red pill side of the house and working through a lot of the sausage making, where we have to deal with the physics of government systems and policies and budgets. And so there's always a lot of hype and a lot of shiny objects. And I tend to be the guy in the room that says, yeah, but we still have to worry about gravity and sand and wind and things like that. So H2O.ai is the largest provider of open source software in the world for AI and ML applications. We're really the industry standard in the commercial sector. 8 of the 10 largest banks use us. We're the crash avoidance system under the hood at Tesla. We help UPS with all their package and truck routing systems, PayPal, anywhere where real-time data needs to help with decision-making, we're running under the hood almost globally with over 20,000 companies. So we're just now bringing our capabilities to the federal government and the public sector, and I'm really excited to listen to the today's conversation, and hopefully we can contribute.
Great, excellent. Thank you all so much for introducing yourself. So diving right into the content, as AI and ML begin to emerge as more prevalent initiatives for agencies and organizations, I'd like to hear from each of you all. Shakib, maybe we can start with you. Could you shed a little bit of light on where AI and ML fit into your overall mission objectives? And can you also provide some insight into how or if AI and ML can contribute to measurable benefits for your teams? Shakib?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kirsten. Let me, hello, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Sorry, yeah, I think I got disconnected, so I'm glad I'm back. Let me preface that by saying that AI is really the premier technology of the 21st century. So it's critical for us as a nation to lead in this field. And we know the benefits of AI, the potential benefits for federal agency. AI has helped us deliver mission more effectively and efficiently. It helps us make evidence-based decisions, improve on the customer experience, perform intelligent automation, enhance data privacy and ethical data practices, as well as strengthen our cybersecurity systems. So that's what we want to use AI for, to better deliver on our mission and achieve our objectives. So the question is how to proceed strategically and tactically, and how to accelerate these benefits while also assessing and qualifying the challenges that we know, because we want to also use AI responsibly. So these include accelerators, such as capability to properly leverage AI in terms of access to quality data, required skills, and more fundamentally, to promote a data-driven culture, but also some guardrails that we have to be careful about that regards our values, including privacy, transparency, accountability, safety, and fairness. So how do we do that? So the issue is that a large number of federal agencies are still struggling with all that architectures that were developed to serve hundreds of applications in a vertically oriented siloed approach. But in the meantime, we know that data is the lifeblood of effective digital transformation and AI transformation. And data never sleeps. It continues to swamp our systems, and most of it actually suffer from a lack of proper quality management and governance. So actually, Congress had the foresight to provide NTIS with a unique authority within the federal government. That's what I want to mention here. It allows us to enter in partnership with the nation's top private sector companies, academic institutions, and nonprofit to basically address national data-centric challenges and accelerate data-driven solutions and AI-based capabilities. And it's available to all federal agencies seeking an agile capacity to scale to meet critical mission data priorities. So we perform outside the FAR. So it's very unique authority. And that allows us to use it with an agile framework. So we are all about innovation. So when we talk about AI and data science and data innovation, it's sometimes hard to actually know exactly what to do. It's a new technology. It's when you develop an AI model, it's a living software. It constantly changes, and you can have data drift. So it's constantly learning from data and affected by the inclusion of additional data, etc. So we need to have an agile approach to those problems, and that's what we offer to our authority and our services at the NTIS. And I will be glad later to discuss some of the projects that we've been involved with. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Shakib, for kicking us off with that one. Jock, I wanted to ask you next about your overall mission objectives and any insight that you can provide on how you contribute this to measuring the benefits for your team.
Absolutely. So basically where we break down how we develop our strategy is kind of in two bins, warfighters and warfighting, right? So the warfighter is really focused on the human aspect, the soldier themselves, and it's really under the lens similar in the healthcare of like social determinants of health, right? But it's really driven towards how do we create more efficiencies and effects with what we've been asked to do by our nation as the land component and the immediate reaction force. So based on that, we have a number of initiatives that we go down on the human performance side. And really what we try to do is tackle best of breed. So we partner with other Army elements because that's our service, right? That have done research, and we try to operationalize their research. So you may be familiar with like the Mastery program, which does a lot of sensor data injects, to see whether it's, heart rate, whether it's any other, biometrics, and then even to the point of team dynamics, to where we put sensors on weapons to understand how the team is communicating through like a course of fire, right? So those end up being a lot of the research functions, and what we do is operationalize it. We see value in it. We see how it can create the appropriate programs useful for soldiers. It can create from anywhere from, you know, cognitive skills testing to enhance soldier performance. So on the warfighting side, you have to get to the fight to be in the fight. So there's a big logistics component that comes behind that. So understanding how we can use AI for process improvement to understand where sustainment aspects are, not only on the battlefield, but in flight to the battlefield is pretty key for us. Preventative maintenance in general is key whenever you think through the lens of large scale combat operations. So those are some key areas in which we own the problem. We have the problem. We tend to seek partnerships, whether it's, you know, within DoD or whether it's within industry, to kind of help us out along that process. But yeah, so those are basically the two big buckets, with some, you know, kind of snippets within of how we see AI fitting into us being more effective and efficient.
Thank you, Jock. And Jared, I'd love to hear from you next.
Sure. I think a lot of what Jock said sort of provides a little bit of a foundation for me. And so, you know, when I'm thinking about delivering trusted autonomy on the battlefield, you know, for me, you know, as was said earlier, AI is, you know, globally, there's a race, and, you know, our competitors feel like whoever wins that race is going to control the world in the future. So in a competitive sense, this space is critical. Probably not many that are more critical. But, you know, when I think about delivering trusted autonomy on the battlefield, this is AI as an enabler to autonomous systems engaged in the physical world, right? And starting with the premise that, you know, trust in these autonomous systems is going to make us more effective, you know, I go down that path toward what we need, you know, in operation in order to ensure that we have operational trust, is to understand trust as on a system dependent level, missionary dependent, sort of driven by scenario. And when we sort of couch it, you know, in those terms, we get to a point where we really can talk about trust, which is an emotion in an engineering sense, and develop some quantifiable metrics around trust. And so rather than thinking that we will measure trust actively on the battlefield continuously, we measure these correlates, these sort of characteristics, some of which are sort of like, you know, what Jock was talking about in Master E. They could be biometrics. There are biometrics that we could peg to states of trust in sorts of systems and scenarios, and use those quantifiable metrics really for the PMs of the world to say, here is the enhancement in operational effectiveness you get from your systems by being able to measure and exploit these quantifiable metrics. So quantifiable metrics become a bedrock around delivering trust, and we can use those to be better about requirements writing. We can use those to be better about mission design. And over time, we can build those into the machine intelligence, right? And so we could see AI expanding to incorporate some of these quantifiable metrics around trust. And so we have then AIs that are focused on being the technology gap to deliver trust. So we want to get trust as a product out of simply a certification and qualification conversation where it happens once during the life cycle of a system, to where it's something that happens throughout the life of the system. It's designed into the machine intelligence and helps us to be more effective on the battlefield.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jarrett. Jeff, I want to open it up to you as well and get your industry perspective or some of your thoughts around the discussion so far.
Well, these comments are sort of like the day in the life of my team, right? Where maybe in the morning I'm with Chakib and he's saying, hey, I need to be able to share, collaborate. It's got to be responsible. Jock's telling me that he, you know, hey, this is great, but I got to be able to take it into the field. It needs to be portable and operate on the edge. And Jared's saying, hey, I need to be able to see inside this. It can't be black boxed, right? And these are issues and requirements we run into every day, right? So part of what we try to help organizations understand, because you can't sort of spread it like peanut butter. You've got to make sure that it really impacts the mission. And so a lot of our experience coming out of highly regulated environments, a lot of real-time environments, translates really well over into the DoD and into the public sector. And so when it comes to trust, you've got to be able to explain it, document it. It can't be, not everybody has a PhD in mathematics. It's got to be able to be explained and understood sort of in layman's terms. And if you're going to make a kinetic decision, you really need to know what's there. It can't be confusing. And so I think helping organizations understand what's going on under the hood, doing that in terms so that I'll call it the business owner or the mission owner, as well as the operator and the scientist, those groups tend to have different vernaculars and different terminology. And so a lot of that is helping find the communication and the visualization and the other artifacts, candidly, that you need to have to help weave this together. And so if you're, to Jock's point, they have sensors on everything, right? And everything's moving. And, we've had great discussions with, folks down at the battle lab where they're like, hey, this is great, but, I've got a 19-year-old kid at the end of this. He doesn't have a data science degree. I can't ask him to build a model. I need an easy button, right? And so you've got those considerations, which are important. And so, everybody's all over the place and there's lots of things going on. That's why this is hard. And you can't just show up and say, hey, here's my thing, here's my widget. It solves every problem. And I think, candidly, from our perspective as an open source platform, we're trying to enable these mission elements, right? And so, you've got a full range of maturity that occurs across all of these organizations. And I think, to Chakib's point earlier, I was part of the early data calls with the DoD and DISA, and to see that full spectrum of organizations and maturity and size, and can I wrangle the data, and what does this mean, and can I use it? So this is a hard problem. What I'm excited about is there are a lot of really, really, really smart people trying to figure this out. And so I think, as everybody rolls out, to me, the trust part, to Jared's point, is really, really, really critical. If a commander or an executive or a legislator cannot get up in front of someone and explain to them why a decision was made, why a recommendation was made, why a move was made, and do it and understand and trust it in their heart, that's where that's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. So it's exciting to see these things going on, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. All right, I'm going to call for poll question number 1. If we could go ahead and put those up. Before I ask my second question for our panelists, though, is there any other comments here that you all would like to make? All right.
Yeah, I want to tack on to the whole idea of explainable AI. I think you build trust with being able to understand the model and the decision, tree that the model goes through. So anytime, I equate it to raising a model is like, it takes a village, right? It's they start out at an infancy level, you train them up on a data set, they become better, you try to alleviate any bias, just like you do with your kids or anything else, right? Like you try to keep them on the right course that they need to be on. But it's really key to have explainable AI so that not only leaders, but also the users that are engaging or maybe utilizing AI can know and understand that what that model is actually doing, no different than they can look over to a human and ask a question and get an explanation back. So it's very key. And I think that's a part of building trust, right? So not only on the acquisitions process, but actually building trust for the use and implementation of AI and integrating it into your workflows. So those are really key points that are important to us at the operational and tactical level as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jock.
Yeah, and just to his point, when you get with an operator and you give them the ability to interrogate and understand the model, that's where the tradecraft comes in. So if you've got somebody that's downranged and they really have a good understanding of what's going on, and you presenting them with a model, they may say, hey, the demographic you've got built in or the elevation that's built in doesn't match my scenario. What happens if I take elevation out? And what's good is now you can immediately turn to any number of additional models that have been generated and say, well, that's model 1, 2, 3. Let's look at it. And that's how you begin to build trust with guys whose lives are on the line, candidly, if they understand what's going on. So to Jock's point, that's a really key threshold we all need to get over and through.
All right, well, I think that dovetails nicely into my next question around expertise. So finding and keeping expertise in AI and ML is an ongoing challenge across all areas of industry, and especially for the government. Jared, I'm going to call on you first for this one. Could you please speak to how you are addressing these personal needs? So are you outsourcing to traditional system integrators and boutique analytics shops, or are you upskilling your current team, or are you growing data science expertise? What is it that you guys are doing for that?
So it's really interesting being in DoD at the Office of the Secretary of Defense level, because a lot of these questions, because DoD is so vast and complex, I can always answer all of the above, right? We're interested in all of those things. We are, promoting the growth of new companies, startups, and small businesses. We are, of course, engaging with the traditional players, the OEMs, and the large companies that have traditionally delivered at scale. I have, as part of my responsibility, to understand the capacity of the industrial base. And really, I think about that as in terms of the future industrial base. Where are we going to be with these fourth industrial revolution technologies that we're trying to incorporate for defense objectives, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And I reflect back to the comments that were made before. I've talked a lot about, quantifiable metrics, right? And what they would mean for us in terms of being able to peg trust and move it out of simply a certification and qualification discussion into, other areas where we want to design, sorts of paths forward. And this whole question around quantifiable metrics, it nests in research and it nests in implementation, right? I think on the implementation side, it really gives us a way to connect what we want to measure to operational effectiveness. I think Jock made a very good point. When we think about these metrics, there wouldn't simply be one set of metrics for system and mission. I mean, but you have to think about the echelons, right? So at the individual level, where you have human machine teams, at the user level, there would be metrics that would govern that, those sorts of trust dynamics. At the enterprise level, where commanders are making decisions, there'd be different metrics that would govern there. And then in the middle, where you have team dynamics, heterogeneous mixes of soldier systems, metrics there. But all of these sorts of quantifiable metrics that we would use with machine intelligence to help us in delivering autonomous capability, understanding those metrics is a commercial opportunity. I think Jeff talked about it a bit, around how do we find these metrics, how do we, measure them, and then how do we deliver the information for decision-making tool. So you see DoD, I think, really focusing on the talent pipeline, the recruitment and retention. Just the other day, we had some announcements from our HBCUI program, awarding through the Navy programs about $27 million to some institutions that probably have great talent but haven't been a part of the mix. And so we're looking at places we haven't looked before. The Air Force just announcing a UARC, which would be an HBCU-led UARC on tactical autonomy. Again, expanding the aperture to look for talent in places we probably haven't before, understanding that down the road, there will be critical need to grow the talent base and to maintain an eye on the capacity of the industrial base in the future to produce these technologies that will need to maintain overmatch for the warfighter down the road.
Thank you, Jarrett. And Jock, would you like to respond next?
Absolutely. So our approach is basically a three-pronged approach, but the way I see kind of industry and defense balancing out, like the AI data scientist talent is very weighted on the industry side right now. What what I do see happening over the course of several years is that scale will end up balancing itself out to some degree as DoD as a whole starts taking on the training task, new skill sets, upskilling. But our approach here is largely we do it three ways, right? We partner, we heavily partner with those that want to partner, even at the OSD level with CDAO. We have partnerships with them. We partner with internal to the service with AI2C out of Carnegie Mellon, the 75th Innovation Command, which is a really unique reserve unit that has a lot of tech talent embedded within. And then the last course is we buy, right? So we have what we call tactical data teams, and essentially they are co-located with our domain experts, and they work on anywhere from automation problems to developing some sort of model. And then, through those teams, we have these skill sets that allow us to take something that's in an RDT&E environment and pull it to the operational level, maybe take it out of the lab, get the model dirty, see how it works out in the field, and then, do the little tweaks and changes that are needed to operationalize it. But internal to the 18th Airborne Corps, we just stood up a unit called the Data Warfare Company, and it's direct military overhires through our HICOM, ForceCom, to where we have software developers as well as data engineers, not to the degree of data scientists yet, because those are still with the AI2Cs and the 75ths and partnerships that we have. But it's the beginning of us kind of institutionalizing this concept of data as ammunition, right? Like we say a lot of it, we talk about it, you read the articles on it, but this is our instantiation of that. So we do a lot of also partnerships with like the USMA West Point on upskilling our leaders as to how to make data-driven decisions. Whether it's simple analytics or really advanced analytic methods with AI and ML. So right now, depending on the task, depending on the complexity, if there is an easier solution out there, we align it with the right skill sets. And sometimes that skill set is either a bought, it's internal, or it's a partnership. But fundamentally, we believe in training our own organization to upskill so they understand and can implement better. So we're doing that as well.
Thank you, Jock. And Shakib, how about over at NTIS?
Well, I agree with what Jared and Jock said about all of the above approach. I think at this point is very important. But I want to make first a very important point that we are actually at the even AI has been around for a little while. Is basically evolving still. So even in terms of explainability, for instance, there are a lot of models that have been developed that start progressing in terms of being more explainable in a matter of weeks, not years. So the field is evolving very quickly. So I think it's extremely important for all federal agencies to get the foundation right. And the foundation is data. Data basically is the lifeblood of AI. So any machine learning models are actually powered by data. So when machine learning learn how to make decisions, like Jared said, sometimes in real time, or identify patterns or make predictions, they all based on the data they are being consuming and learning from. So, but the problem with data is that there's a lot of challenges with data. There are, of course, imperfection in terms of the what we call domain bias. That means there is actually the data doesn't really represent what it's supposed to represent, or there is a bias in terms of historic bias or selection bias. It's not representing the whole spectrum that it's supposed to do. And there is also the noise. The data can come from with poor quality or improper labeling. So it's very important to strengthen the foundation of the data. And then I think, like Jock said, the skills that we need right now for federal agencies is basically the data engineering skills and data architecture skills. Yeah, we need machine learning engineers eventually, but I think we have to focus first on the foundation, on the data. Let's make it right, because data is going to basically indicate how well we're going to be successful in implementing models in the future, and also developing a data-driven culture, because data keeps coming and the models need to be relearned and adjusted in a cyclic basis. So and the data-driven culture is not going to come from the bottom up. It's going to start from the top down. So we need really the leadership. We need a buy-in from the leadership. And that's important to have that leadership, understand this technology, understand what are the needs, what are the requirements, and of course, supply the skills and the resources that are needed to be successful. But just quickly about the Department of Commerce, how we do it in the Department of Commerce. Well, we have a working group, the data skills working group that we've been working about a few years, defining exactly the types of skills that are needed for every persona, data engineer, data scientist, data analyst, etc. And then we try to know what are the skills that are within the Department of Commerce, of employees that are there and that what they need to become a data analyst, etc. So this help us also upscale from within, as well as identify what we need from outside. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Shakib. And Jeff, I want to open it up to you as well.
Well, I'll be blunt, fairly straightforward. There just aren't enough people to do this work, right? Everywhere we go, people will say, "This is great, but I don't have enough people to do this. I don't have the right people." I'm lucky. I've got 330 people in my team, and 280 of them are data scientists, right? We've got 25 Kaggle Grand Masters, which are sort of the very, very top-rated data scientists on the planet, right? Google's got 3, NVIDIA has 7. I've got 10% of the world's Kaggle Grand Masters. So what we're trying to do, we've got a program called AI for Good. We're literally trying to get as much of this information out there. We've got free training and certification, 40, 50 hours of it, because, just like you have back office, everybody's got to know PowerPoint and they've got to know other basic skills. Having basic data manipulation and analyst understanding, I think, is going to become part of that baseline that we're talking about here. And so trying to, I think, to Shakib's point is we're early days. It's been around, but it's early days. We're kind of like where cyber was 8 or 10 years ago. Lots of really smart people solving problems, but there's still a lot of manual work done in between, right? They're creating their own scripts. I remember going into Security Operations Center back in the day, and the analysts and the Intel analysts were also software developers and engineers, because they had to write scripts to get their stuff to talk to each other to complete their workflow. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey guys, let's take that pick and shovel work. If we can have a machine do the work, all of that work, documenting, visualizing, running and testing models over and over and over again, you don't want to have your big brain people doing that work. Keep them focused on the cognitive side, validating what's coming through, taking the tradecraft and the understanding and the mission and applying that in. And I think that we go in and talk to organizations, and you'll have someone who says, hey, I have a huge problem and not enough people. And then the few guys that are there are worried you're trying to replace them, right? We're not trying to replace you. We're trying to make your job easier, right? We're trying to help you. Instead of solving, 10 problems a day, why not solve 100 problems a day, right? And so this personnel issue isn't going to go away. I think you've got to upskill. In the cyberspace, we used to look for musicians, right? People that had musical skills were really good at finding patterns and solving problems. They were very proactive. I think that same sort of soft skill profile probably exists in the data science world, right? And we're using AI to find those people, right? So we work with Workday and ADP, and say, it's not just what's on the resume, but what are some of those other soft skills? What's sitting in the background, where they grew up, what their hobbies are? How do you draw those people out to solve these problems? And so it's very interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments there before we move on to the next question? Okay, well, I'm going to call for poll number 2 then, and we'll get that up there on the screen momentarily. What is your agency's greatest concern in leveraging AI? And whenever that poll is complete, we'll pop the results up. All right, so moving right along, agencies don't necessarily buy AI every day, and we are finding that requirements, due diligence, and acquisition approaches that have worked in areas such as the cloud and cyber, they don't always line up with procuring AI capability that an organization is willing to trust and use in production scenarios. So starting with Jock this time, I don't think you've kicked the question off for us yet. Can you speak to some challenges, successes, and lessons learned when it comes to building and maintaining trust in the capabilities that you are seeing deployed?
Yeah, so whenever it comes to trusting the models, and I won't dive into particular areas in which we're working, but it really comes back to a very deep and intimate engagement with the actual model developers, right? Because we don't necessarily have the acquisitions, put down, like Jarrett was saying, like we're working on trying to figure out, what are the quantifiables, so people understand that there are guardrails on it, and they won't come off. As we actually seek to operationalize, you have to have an intimacy with the actual developers to know and understand, what drove, this bounding box on something, or it derived this, this suggestion out of something else, because frankly we get a lot of questions. So really, the acquisitions approach to that for us it has to be a very agile acquisitions process, because if you step back and take the lens of like how you build tanks, right? You go and you gather requirements, and largely the user community doesn't have a lot of contact with the people that are building tanks. There may be a little bit, but it's not a day-to-day basis. Whenever it comes to software, and let's be clear, AI is software, that agile acquisitions, that agile approach that puts the actual developers, the scientists next to the users to get rapid feedback, also gains and builds trust. So that's why the acquisitions is key for us, to be able to know and understand from a user level what's going on behind the scenes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jock. Who would like to respond to that next? Jared, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So when I came to my position about a year ago, the undersecretary, I had a chance to, brief her directly. We had a conversation about this, and it was very clear to me that from her perspective, she wanted trust as a deliverable, as a battlefield asset. And I knew that the work that we were doing on the research side, this trust conversation really had been relegated to, as I said, test and evaluation, certification. Now, the test and evaluation community is doing an amazing job, and they're going to deliver some great applications and tools for us in this space. But, where is the rest of the technology spectrum on helping us to sort of fill the deficit? And again, it gets back to the user level, the commander level. How do we get there? And when we start to think about how we get there, it has to come through some sort of acquisition portal. Jock mentioned Agile. There is a new policy out there from DoD. I'm going to get the number wrong. It's something like 5,809, something like that. There's a policy on Agile acquisition for DoD. So we do have some guidance out there. But one thing that I've tried to do is I've stood up this initiative around trusted autonomy and attempted to build some guidance on the acquisition side, is to say that requirements and thresholds and whatever you want to call it, they need to come not as a mandate, but more as a value proposition. Mm-hmm. And so we say to program managers and PEOs of the world, as you're looking at cost, schedule, performance to actually deliver, I don't want to come to you with an extra mandate that weighs you down in any of those categories, but really the value proposition, how, and my approach is through these quantifiable metrics that link to operational effectiveness. How can we show this enhancing your system capability, enhancing the capability that we put in the field for the warfighter? And in those terms, then we're not talking about sort of adding sort of a friction to the acquisition process, but really, introducing value that helps us accelerate delivery.
Thank you. Shakib, did you want to go next?
Absolutely. I think these are great points. So responsible AI basically builds trust in AI application. And we have a lot of frameworks that are out there to promote trustworthy and responsible AI. Those are very important. The issue is how to put them in practice and get to what Jared has been saying since the beginning of this talk, quantifiable metrics, because that's the key, is how much explainability we have. I mean, AI inherently uncertain. So it cannot be 100%. So how much we are comfortable with? I mean, it depends, of course, on the context. So it's very important that this framework are developed within the context, with the domain knowledge, etc. So that's what we're trying to do at NTIS. We have this very agile framework that we work with, and we work very tightly with the agency because they are the SMEs. We give access to the industry, academia, and nonprofit expertise, and the possibility to scale and to achieve in market speed. But we work closely with the agency because they are the subject matter expert, and that help us provide the trust that they need to have in the model, and that include how they get the data, what that data is for, how do they label the data, how they classify the data. All that is extremely important to make the model successful, and then to build that trust. Trust is going to be an ongoing process, and it has to apply throughout the machine learning cycle and the data life cycle. So it's something that we have to work on, and like Jared said, develop quantifiable metrics that will help us clarify how we can make best decision, or not make a decision because we don't have enough information, we don't have enough confidence to make that information. And the main aspect of that is to work within an agile environment that allow you to be flexible enough to make those goals, to make the adjustment necessary as you moving forward with that. And again, artificial intelligence models are living software. They're not, okay, I developed this and then I go on. No, they are with us forever. So we need to have a great understanding of how they work, great transparency, specific process for accountability, and make sure that we have mitigation policies to help address any issue that come up. And the earlier the better. So always start with the prototype, and then try to better understand how the model works, and then what are the impact of that potential model, and then be ready for once the whole model is deployed.
Thank you, Shakib. And then Jeff.
Well, I mean, we could probably talk for 5 days on this topic, right? It's pretty complex. I had a really good conversation with Joe Chapa, who's the Chief Responsible AI Ethics Officer over at the Air Force. And he's like, Jeff, we can't put a data science in every PEO, scientist in every PEO for the acquisition, right? And so part of what we've been working with, we sell AI every day. Most of the customers we've talked to, they've never bought it before. They've just started. They're not really sure, right? And they're nervous and they're trying to figure this out. And getting the right people in the room is really important. And candidly, a lot of times, your infrastructure and your solutions architects are great people, but if there's a mission requirement, and let's say you've got to look at images, let's get the image analyst in there so we can show him how a deep learning algorithm or an image analysis, here's what it's going to look at. Is this good information for you? Because those are the kinds of requirements that need to go into the acquisition process. And what we're finding, candidly, we've done an extensive review. The government's still up at 5,000 feet from requirements. Everything's still getting sort of characterized as analytics, right? And what we do need to do is help the end users refine those requirements so they're getting the right tool for the right problem to solve that that issue at the mission level, and helping them understand what the art of the possible is. It used to be that every organization, the natural language processing people had a team and tools and a workflow, and then the image analysts had their own, their own silo of excellence, and now you've got the audio people and video and so forth. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. As a matter of fact, state of the art is cross domain, and you can integrate all of that and run things in parallel. And so helping folks understand, to Jared's point, autonomy can mean a lot of things to different people. And oh, by the way, risk to Jock is going to be very different than maybe risk to Chalib. And you may come in and say, hey, I've got an accuracy of 80%. And one person on the side of the room will say, well, that's no good. And someone else will say, hey, I got 0 right now. 80 is good enough for me, right? And so that all of these things are the buttons and knobs. And so it's not going to get solved, but I would encourage, you guys are the buyers of this capability, and you're providing it back out. I would encourage you to really challenge your vendor partners and your technology advisors. Get under the hood. You can't black box things anymore. You need to know exactly what's going on, the architecture and everything that's out there. And I'm not saying, tell me what your algorithm's doing. You need to be able to understand how things are happening, how it's being tracked. Is it reproducible? Can you audit that? Can you give me a document that lays this out explicitly? And that needs to be standard practices. And so getting those types of empirical elements, documentation components built into the requirements gets rid of a lot of the high level stuff that isn't, or a lot of, let's say, buyer remorse occurs when it looks really good on a dashboard. But if I've got to make critical tactical decisions in real time, the idea of going into a room with a bunch of folks in camouflage, and he says, well, what happens if I change this variable? And they said, well, we've got to leave for a day and come back. That's no good. They need to know right there in real time. And that needs to be part of the requirements process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, panelists, if you could look over at the Q&A, we have 2 questions that came in. I'm hoping that we can respond to those rather quickly, review those. In the meantime, if our events team could pop up our 3rd and final poll question, we're gonna respond to that. Is your agency looking to acquire AI tools and capabilities? Okay, so back to the Q&A chat. Joe writes in, from a healthcare vendor perspective, selling AI and ML software to the VA medical facilities, what are some best practices for initiating and navigating the required FedRAMP process?
Well, I'll give you an industry perspective. First of all, it's up to the authorizing official of that organization as to what they're going to do with their data, right? And whether and candidly, when you dig into these really critical areas, I mean, FedRAMP's really good for managed and cloud, but most of the folks we're talking to, they want to keep that data in their environment where it's controlled. So FedRAMP is not always a part of that, right? There are going to be certain different requirements for it, but I would sit down and make sure you get ground truth from the authorizing official. And at the end of the day, if there's a FedRAMP requirement, your vendor's got to be able to demonstrate that they meet those security controls, those compliance and governance issues. And bottom line is, if you can't get there and that's the minimum bar, that's a disqualifying event, just move on, right? And so, I don't know from the other gentleman's perspective how they deal with that. I would think in some areas FedRAMP's required. I can tell you, talking to some DoD folks, they've got very urgent issues. They need to be able to validate other areas before FedRAMP pops up anywhere along the line.
Thank you, Jeff. We could take one more response to that if the panelists would like. Otherwise, we can move on to the next question. Okay. All right, next question is like power hour, but not the drinking game. We're just going to get through these questions real quick. What is the best practice to avoid cultural bias? There are known cultural biases training AI because there is a lack of diverse data specialists. People select what they know. Okay, so what is the best practice to avoid cultural bias?
Well, I'm going to use what Jock talked about earlier, which is the explainability part, right? There are plenty of capabilities out there in the industry right now where you can make sure if you've got protected classes or other bias. Listen, every model has a bias, right? And what you have to determine is what's an acceptable bias or an unacceptable bias. And so we've got capabilities, for example, we call it our model analyzer, where every single one of our models that's generated basically goes through a process, it's documented, it's audited, and it's got a very detailed, but what I'll say in layman's terms, this is going to tell you why this model made this decision. And it's going to tell you, is there some impact on a protected class or in some other bias area? And what's really interesting is we're bringing third-party models in. So you may have someone say, hey, we developed all these models, but they've been black box. We don't know what's going on. Someone else did it. We're still relying on them. How can I continue to trust them? And so, now there's, capabilities that we provide to our community where they can bring those models in and you can look at the counterfactuals, you can understand how the model's making the decision. Are there certain fields or features within your data set? So for example, in the DoD, we're concerned about adversaries getting into our data environment, changing the data to either to a predetermined outcome or for one, just so it's wrong. And so helping organizations understand, hey, these particular features right now, if they change, your whole model is blown up. Well, we need to protect that cell level data protection, for example. So those pieces and parts are there. I would encourage you to ask your vendor to show it to you and explain it to you. And, if your 15 or 16-year-old kid doesn't understand the explanation, there may be a little bit of hand waving in there. You need to be able to understand it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Anyone else on the panel?
Maybe I can add. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Chucky. I'll tackle
Right.
that.
Just quickly, so and let Jared. I will add to that. Cultural bias in AI come again from data. So historical data and representative data, etc. So Reynaldo mentioned that the fact that there should be more diversity in when developing data models, etc. So that's extremely important, of course. And it doesn't have to be just from the data scientist perspective. The stakeholders have to be involved. People from different backgrounds and responsibilities have to be involved in anything that can have potential impact, in negative impact. So all of those can help make sure that the data that is collected is actually the one that and so human in what they call in the loop is extremely important. So to actually make the adjustment that needed for the data. We all know the headlines about the examples of when they were hiring in some big companies and then they were discriminatory towards for instance, gender, etc. And that was just based on the historical data that they had. And we think it's a simple thing because, but it's hard. It's the way they did it is just they said, okay, well, let's not identify the gender in our data. But of course, there was some proxy data that reflected that. So it's very important to be very careful about how the data is collected and how it's what does it reflect, and how can it be adjusted in terms of bias to avoid the consequences at the end that can be very negative and very hurtful for a lot of people. So it's very important to do it at the when we collect the data at the beginning. And let Jared expand on that.
There, go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, as long ago as 2015, 2016, the Defense Science Board was talking about path forward for autonomy, they talked about notions of continuous monitoring. And then in 2020, the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board came back around, talking about this notion of continuous monitoring, sort of being able to do things in real time The way that we've seen development proceed, though, is around, Jeff said, it's a really hard problem to even do perception intelligence, natural language processing. These are really hard problems. But we always discuss especially these learning machines, in terms of they're going to be out there on their own just doing stuff, and we have no way to they're doing. But I think the opportunity exists, I'm going to say it one more time, around designing quantifiable metrics that we track and monitor along with the performance of the machine, so that anytime the machine is delivering something about decision, there's additional information for us to look at and judge as to, whether, and Jeff made a great example. I mean, if I'm in a really high crisis situation, I might accept 80% because, that's the best we can do. But if given time, that may not be good enough. And given sort of certain biases, that may not be good enough. But we will have that information along with the performing machine. And so I think when we have these conversations around bias, around, sort of lethality of these systems, or whatever it is, we have to also add that this additional information that will be available to us and that we should now build into the design of the system will offer a way to mitigate some of these issues that really are real, and as Jakeem said, can be hurtful in unintended ways. But we really have to have the discussion with this sort of mitigating factor in there, and really think about how we design with that mitigation going forward, in my opinion, to address some of these issues.
All right. Well, thank you, Jared. Thank you, panelists. Let's go around in 30 seconds or less, just your key takeaway from this discussion or your parting words with our audience you would like to leave us with. Jock, let's start with you, please.
Sure. So I think it's key for anybody embarking on an AI journey, know and understand your organization's mission set and how AI can enable it, and then invest in your people upfront, right? So we talk about not outsourcing all the things. You don't always want to outsource your data and AI talent. So invest in your people upfront. Explainable AI is very key to, especially decision makers, and knowing and understanding their reliance on AI to get to a decision for their organization. And then really big key for us is what we call day 3. So ML ops, the capability to understand any bias inject, the full life cycle of AI models is really important to get things out of a R&D environment into an operational environment. So it's key to have those as well. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Let's hear from Shakib next.
Yeah, I would say that, like Jeff said, AI is hard, but that's why it's exciting, because really the potential of AI is enormous, and it's extremely important for the US to be in the lead, because there are a lot of competition, and AI is really the premier technology of the 21st century. So we need to maintain that leadership in AI in terms of what we do at the federal agencies, but as well in research and development. But the key, of course, of this discussion at this point is to do it responsibly. So to prepare, to be careful when we consider and address the potential risk of implementing AI technology. And so we need to work on that. There are frameworks out there. They have a lot of good things in there. So let's learn how to implement those principles and adapt them to models that we have. And it's a learning process. So the sooner we start, the better.
Excellent. Thank you, Shakib. And over to Jared.
Yeah, I would just say, wow, great conversation. Just yesterday, an article came out from a colleague in Nature Worldview that asked the question, who funds implementation? And so this is a great thought leadership discussion where we have a thought leader from the user community, the government research development, and then wow, Jeff, those comments from the industry were really great. So we could really see across the board here how what we'll do and think about for implementation is really linked to this critical area where we have to stay ahead. So it's not just research for the sake of research. It's not just sort of doing things for novelty's sake, but how do we focus on research that leads to transition that accelerates delivery? And I think this conversation today was right on point. So thanks for letting me sit in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And Jeff.
I guess the one thing I'd say is for all the organizations is you need to challenge your vendors and your partners to make sure that they can explain what's going on. And at the end of the day, we're experts in getting into production, right? We move people into production very quickly. In the government, we tend to sit a lot in test and experimentation. And then for any number of reasons, things don't get to production. As it turns out, the stuff they've been building in the test environment can't even run in production anyway. So you need to make sure that assume you're going to be successful and say, hey, if I want to put this into production, what's that look like? And if they tell you it's 6 months, well, then maybe you need to rethink what you're doing. You need to be able to push a button and have it go into production. And that's done in the commercial sector. What we're really trying to do is help government adopt those best practices, whether you're tracking fraud or doing real-time analytics on tracking packages or logistics, preventative maintenance. All that stuff is being done at scale at $1 billion level in some of the biggest companies in the world. And we want to get that over into the government's hands, but we need to make sure that the government customers are asking the right questions so that they have the right mission outcome, right? And so I think that whole, not rethinking things, but making sure you're not just bringing the same people into the room you always did. Ask that curmudgeon in the room who doesn't trust anything, what they really think, and that sometimes will help you get where you need to get to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. We are going to have one more poll question. If you answered our polls and you'd like to have your CPE credit emailed to you, let us know. Well, thank you so much to our partners at H2O.ai and our awesome panelists, and you all at home for engaging with us today. We really hope to see you at the next one, which is coming up on October 13th around managing data protection and recovery challenges at scale. So if you like this content, you might like that one. Go to our website and register for that. It's free, of course. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Take care. Bye.